Okay, ballads are the most difficult things to play, especially for younger groups in this time because we don't really dance slow music like we used to. It could be good to get your band into actually some swing dancing at slower tempos. Is some people talk about feeling the triplet and all these different kind of technical things. I don't know. I'm not a big believer in that. I believe you can subdivide beats and it helps you. Boom, 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 boom. I'm just a believer in the danceability of things and that the whole kind of physical dance response helps you to play better. And I don't think there's any way around that. And I believe that the music is designed to help you develop a physical relationship with music and with other people. And as we try to become more like cyborgs and computers, we want less contact with people. We become at odds with our music because our music is not a music that puts. Our music is not a music that puts. Our music is not a music that has. How can I say that? Our music is not a music that leads you into a space of solitude and away from other people. Our music is a music that is communal. Our greatest achievements tend to be communal achievements. Even if you take solo people who are known to be great, like Charlie Parker, you can't conceive of him without Dizzy, without Dizzy, without Monk, without all the great musicians he played with. You cannot conceive of Louis Armstrong without King Oliver. And whenever Louis Armstrong, he's probably the greatest example because he was such a prolific letter writer. The personal way that he addresses everyone in those letters, any kind of person he met, the way he would take pictures with people and his feeling about human beings and humanity in general is central to our music. And you can go into any part of the tradition of our music. Now at this point, with the exception of some aspects of what we call Afro-Latin jazz, there's no more real dancing to our music. And as people get away from playing that form of music, there also will be no dancing to that. It's the dance is what makes it vibrant. In a time like this, sometimes it's important for musicians, maybe we'll be the only ones who know what that is, encourage a band to dance. That said, this is a classic kind of Ellingtonian technique. The trombone lays out a beautiful pad at the bottom. It's a wonderful blended sound with a spread of like a tenth or something and a fifth in between. It covers the entire lower middle register to the lower register. Very warm sound of those horns playing that way. And then in it is a unison saxophone line that's like a thread. There's a spool that runs underneath K, you've been doing this for years. It's a thread that runs underneath the melody line. One thing in this, our saxophones, of course, with Ted and Victor and with Paul, and they've been playing together for a long time, and Camille is just with us, not for long, but she sees how they're playing. Even on the tape we just did, you'll notice the first time through they were not together. The second time, they were completely together because they had to get acclimated to who's playing the lead. Remember, unison lines are more difficult to play as ensemble parts. So the other saxophones have got to listen to Ted's phrasing and the way he's playing that part and give way to it. And they did do that. The last time we went through after the bridge was perfect. Another thing about this is the rise and fall of a part. Like you'll notice, we talk many times about those last two bars. The baritone part that comes in 2 before D. He comes in, boom, the trombones have an accent, like almost like a sforzando. The Barry gives a big, powerful answer to while Sherman is playing, Paul is playing that answer. Then we go into the last 8 bars before the bridge, and the trombone and saxophone choir play. They have to have a great intonation and sound and balance led by the second alto. And when Ted starts to swoop up in the second bar of D, they swoop up with him. And then he comes down. He's able to shape that phrase. Important for the band, we did a good job of this going into E. The lead trumpet played exactly in the orbit of phrasing that Carlos played in. So Carlos said, don, 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 ding. He said, lo, do, bo, don. You can play rhythms that are written on the page the same way, but they're not the same consciousness. The way he played the part just then, you knew it was related exactly to what Carlos had played. Also, for the soloist, when you have to fill in space, the band is holding a chord, Very important to be attentive to that chord, the third bar V. Also, we did a good job of that. The entire band cut off with the lead trumpet on the downbeat of the fourth bar. Okay, it's interesting for me because after all these years, of course, I'm listening to us very technically. And a lot of the technical things we are doing that we might have talked about 15, 20 years, I don't know how many years ago, now it's just a certain level of natural discipline we have from years of doing it. So if you listen to the brass section, cuts off together, and Sherman has to bridge that space. So he starts to fill in the space over the long note, he bridges the space, and he plays down to the point that the melody comes back in. The lead trumpet is gonna lead us up higher. Ryan did that very well on this. We followed him, and we cut off, and the space was managed well. I'm telling you all of these things because you don't want your band to feel like when they see chord changes or they see something that just means solo. Solos have different functions. Yes, you improvise, but when you improvise the alto part at letter E, you are now accompanying an ensemble that has accompanied you. So you have to be conscious of that switching in roles. And Duke does this a lot. It's a great kind of relationship thing to have. It gives you a kind of well-rounded understanding of your function in any type of society. Then we come back at F. It's a recapitulation of things that we've played, and we take it out. I think maybe we're gonna play it a second time. I think maybe we could talk about it before we play. Maybe if we hear from Sherman, because he's playing the solo. If we from Vince or somebody in the trombone section, because they have a very difficult part on the offbeat. And anybody else who wants to talk about whatever it is.
Yeah, one of the things that whoever's playing this alto part, the lead part, the melody, one thing they should try to do is learn the changes to the song. Know where your line is, where it falls in the chord changes. To really understand what it is, not just learn the melody and that's it. Learn everything else about it. So when you start making changes to things and improvising the melody, you know where you can go. You know, I always say, try not to be ignorant. All right. It should be some rise and some fall. It should be pretty. It should be some crying. It should be, emotion, drama. Try to portray all of that. It could be straight, it can be swinging, you can go back and forth. Depending on the tempo, you can add more or take more away, play more longer notes. I always try, every time when I'm doing something, a ballad, I listen to the way that the rhythm section is playing. If it's a little faster and they're swinging a little bit more, I'll play with them, not try to fight them. We all come together and it'll be a nice time. So every time we play it, it'll be a little bit different, Just be open to what it's going to be. Be in the moment when you're playing this.
Well, often when we have a secondary part, and it's interesting here because Sherman has the lead, essentially he's got the solo lead all the way through, but there are little points that jump out that are lead underneath you, supporting you, and they have their own separate little story. So it's not just, it's a background. It still has its own sort of importance in helping to shape, like everything should be in service of Sherman. So there's been different types of music that we've played where the second alto has little things that peep out and kind of like say, hey, and pass it back to you. And so it becomes, even though it's a background part, it becomes kind of a dialogue. And it's important that you don't just think of it as a background part, that you think of it as something integral to his performance and hopefully to inspire him to feel something. So there's a little bit of a passing back and forth. Even letter B, do, we, just like a simple little line. It's when we break out of the unison and become in harmony for the first time, and it's sort of like, okay, now I have a chance to even though it's very, very short, to tell a little story, and that's hopefully in support of what you're doing. That's what it should be. It should always be in support of the soloist. So.
Also, when you're playing the melody, try to be as clear as you can when there's open space to bring the band in. When we play without a conductor, so we don't have anybody counting 1, 2, 3, 4. So a breath can mean so much to the band. That uptake, be-dee-be-da-da, that gives everybody everything they need in order to play with you. So, just bear that in mind.
Just wanted to add that the part in the trombone section, in order to land on that note that's on the and of one at letter A and it repeats through the entire chart, you have to decide Well, first of all, it's placed on the last part of the triplet, on the third part of the triplet, that you have to decide where that is, and everybody's going to feel that differently. As a section, you have to come to a consensus where boom, boom, op is going to be, boom, op. So you have to place that together. And then you're also going to hear us doing a lot of crescendos and decrescendos, and say the fourth bar of A, and then before D, and then 2 bars before D, underneath the bari solo, the bari line, and then the fourth bar of A underneath the saxophone line. Where you start that crescendo is very important. This is a kind of intimate detail of it, but the saxophone line goes doo-doo-dee-dee, doo-doo-dee-da. You don't want to start that crescendo before they get to the top of their line. So I'm waiting until about beat 4 to start the crescendo, and it ties over onto beat 3. And you want to get that in that space when they're coming down, get the crescendo going up there. And then the same thing when Paul has boo-doo-dee-dee-doo-dee. When he gets to the top of that, that's where you start the crescendo. When he's coming down, boo-doo-dee-doo-doo-dee, when he's coming down into that.
Trombone 3 has an interesting role in this. Because the baritone saxophone is taking the unison passage along with the other saxophones, usually the baritone usually plays a left-handed role in the voicings that we have in the trombone part. So now trombone 3 is taking the place of the bari in that regard. So you have to be mindful where you are in the voicing, and take pride in the low notes that you have when you come up on like 5 after B, when you have the roots. Really embrace that, even though you have mezzo piano. Really bring those notes out in the voicing, and also around letter E, it's also important to know that Ryan has the lead as well as Paul, as well as Elliot. So that's Barry, that's trombone 2, and that's lead trumpet. And there's a point where there's a bit of tension in the 6th bar. Vincent has, in trombone 1, he has the 3rd, but the melody has what we call a sharp 9, and in the trombones in particular, the notes are next to each other. So it's really, really important to be in tune with the lead trumpet and also with the bari, because the bari is leading the saxophone section, and actually Elliot is the lead voice of us in the trombones, right there in that particular part. So just be mindful of where you are in the voicing, and tune to the lead trumpet and tune to whoever has the melody.
The rhythm section has a challenging part. The bass part in itself is challenging because it's a disciplined part. You have to play your part exactly how it is, and give space between the second and fourth beat, in order for the time to lift. The bass is playing 1 and 3 primarily, and if you check out the history of this song, you'll understand that the bass was playing with gut strings. I'm assuming that most of you young musicians are going to be playing with steel strings. Understand that the string tends to not decay, so you have to give space between the second and fourth beat for the sound and the rhythm to lift. So that's something that has to be looked over as you play this. And this is another challenge, is to work on your sound, because you're only playing 1 and 5. So it's a thing about just being disciplined and just not playing extra notes and blending with the drum.
I just want to say something about drum charts in general. It certainly is applicable to this tune. I'd say probably 95% of the time, unlike in a classical situation, if you're playing with an orchestra, you see a drum part, you're going to have to play everything exactly what's on the part. But generally in jazz, arrangers will just give a guide. Basically, the drum part this case,